Our lesson today is on tides. Have you ever gone down to the beach and built a sandcastle on the beach just to watch it be washed away later that day? Well, what you probably experienced then was a tide. Tides occur every day because of the influence of the moon on the Earth's oceans. The gravitational pull of the moon and sun on Earth causes the water to move up or down along the shoreline. Many people think that the sun's gravity has the biggest influence on the tides, but that's not correct. The moon has the greater influence on the tides because the moon is much closer to the Earth. A tidal bulge occurs in Earth's oceans when the moon is overhead. The bulge is called a high tide. On the opposite side of the Earth, a second bulge or high tide happens. Low tides occur at locations between the bulges. The number of tides that occur each day varies from place to place, but most locations along the East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico experience 2 high tides and 2 low tides daily. Some places experience only 1 high tide and 1 low tide each day. Other locations, like the Gulf Coast, experience a varying number of high tides and low tides in a day. Tidal patterns are influenced by large continents, which block the passage of the high tide, the shape of the ocean floor, and the shape of the coastline. Even weather can influence the tides. Yet the tides are very predictable due to the predictability of the moon phases. The difference in height between a high tide and a low tide is called the tidal range. In some places, like the Texas Gulf Coast, the tidal range is small, usually less than 2 feet. In some places, like the Bay of Fundy, near the Atlantic coast of Canada, the tidal range is as much as 20 feet. Again, the tides are the daily rise and fall of the ocean, primarily due to the gravitational pull of the moon. However, the moon and the sun's gravitational pull can work together during a full moon or a new moon, when the Earth and the moon and the sun are all lined up. This is when the Earth will experience the greatest gravitational pull, and during this time we will have the highest of high tides and the lowest of low tides due to this increased gravitational pull. This happens twice a month, during new moon and during full moon, and this is known as the spring tide. Now, when the moon is at third quarter or first quarter, then we will have the lowest of the high tides and the highest of the low tides. In other words, the tide differential will not be as great because the gravitational pull on the Earth is not as great, and so the bulge in the water is not as great as when we have a full moon or a new moon. When we have the lesser tides, when the moon is third quarter and first quarter, these are called Neap Tides. And this also happens twice each month. So we will have a spring tide, and then a week later we will have a Neap tide, and then a week after that we'll have another spring tide, and then the following week we'll have another Neap tide. And of course this is an ongoing process as the moon orbits the Earth and goes through its phases. So to review, the moon and the gravitational pull of the moon is what creates our tides. When the moon is new or full, we have the highest of high and lowest of low tides, and these are the spring tides. When the moon is at first quarter or third quarter, 90 degrees from the Earth and the sun, then we have the lowest high tides, and again the highest low tides, or the less change in the tidal in the tidal pattern, and these are called Neap Tides. It is generally the moon's gravity that causes the tides.